Whew, man, that, I don't have the words to express what I'm feeling, but.
Welcome to the Seeker to Seeker podcast. I'm your host Simeon, and I bring you conversations with students of the human spirit. Today's guest is Michael Griswold. Michael's story is certainly one of the most harrowing I have ever come across, but also one of the most life-affirming. It is a story of losing what you treasure most in life, a story of crushing guilt, living in denial, letting your demons loose, becoming desperate, and then stumbling into the mystical, being spiritually transformed and reborn with deeper understanding of the human condition. I will say no more. It's better to let Michael tell his story. Some of the topics we cover here are trauma, healing, knowing God through suffering, the power of psychedelics to heal and transform, finding meaning, the importance of feeling your feelings, and much, much more. I hope this raw and emotional conversation brings you new appreciation for your life. I hope it will also help you move forward in all the ways you yourself seek healing. And now, without further ado, I bring you Michael Griswold. There's lots of people that are becoming more and more interested in psychedelics, and they have been led to psychedelics through various ways. But I think what grabbed me was your story of how you were basically led to psychedelics. And it's a powerful story, and also, it is a powerful story and not an easy one. But if you feel like it, I think perhaps we can start with this, of how you were led to psychedelics.
Okay, great. Well, in order to tell that story, I've got to press the rewind button and go back a few years and to a young man who fell in love with a girl the first time he met her. Okay, I was 24 years old, met this girl at a party. She was standing at the top of the stairs, and I'm telling you, like a bolt of lightning, I knew the moment I saw this girl. She was wearing jean shorts and a black tank top. And dude, I was done, man. I couldn't explain why, but I just thought, man, this woman, I'm in love with this girl. Well, we were part of a church that was quite strict and had certain rules on dating. And her parents forbade me from dating her for 2.5 years. And asked that I not even tell her that I was interested in her. Now, so for 2.5 years, when I was 24 years old, I didn't date another girl, didn't kiss another girl, didn't have sex with another girl. I was completely committed to this, at this point, just an idea that I had about a woman who I felt like I was in love with. Well, 2.5 years later, her parents finally come and say, hey, listen, what would you say if we said you could ask Libby, that was her name, to start courting? And I said, well, that sounds amazing. Let's do it. So we did. And a few months later, I proposed to her at the top of the Empire State Building. Interestingly enough, when I asked her to start courting, that's what we called it in this church community, was distinguished from dating by basically being a lot more rules. But anyway, when I asked her to start courting, it turns out she was in love with me for the whole time as well, which made the story even more satisfying for us to talk about, like all the times we had hung out as friends, neither one of us saying anything, and both of us feeling this intense desire for each other. Well, anyway, proposed to her at the top of the Empire State Building. She says yes. And we get married. And a few months later, I'm at work and I get a call and she's crying. And I'm like, hey, baby, what's up? And she's like, well, I just took a pregnancy test and it says that it's positive, but I'm sure that can't be right. And because she was, we hadn't really talked about having a baby yet. And so she was worried that I might be upset. And of course, I was delighted. So here we are, married 5 months. We're going to have a baby. And at this point, my life is kind of like a fairy tale, man. Like grew up in a very disadvantaged situation where as a young kid, I didn't really know what the fuck was going on. I didn't feel like My parents loved me. I felt very lonely and discarded, really. So meeting Libby, falling in love with her, finding out that she's in love with me, for her to say yes, for us to get married, for us to have a baby. Dude, this is the fairy tale, man. Like, this is all your dreams coming true, right? And then on the night before our first anniversary, now, are you married, Simeon?
No, I'm not, but I do have a partner, so yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I'll tell you, for us, being married wasn't as easy as I expected it to be. I expected we were going to get married and just live happily ever after like they do in the movies, but it turns out that you actually got to learn how to be married. And so there was, in our first year of marriage, there was a lot of like, man, I don't really know what I'm doing. And but this last weekend before our anniversary, man, we had the best time. It was like we hit this stride, like we had kind of figured out, oh, okay, this is what it means to live with each other. This is what it means to understand each other. This is what it means to communicate with each other. And dude, we're having a great time. So it turns out on the day of our anniversary, I was actually going to be out of town because I worked at this job that required me to travel a lot. And we said, hey, why don't you come with me? She's 7.5 months pregnant at this point. It's our anniversary. Dude, we should be together to celebrate, man. Right? So she would never come with me to work, but on this particular occasion she did. So we leave for the road trip on Sunday night. And we left a little late because we had dinner with some friends. And as we're driving up, it's probably about 10 o'clock at night. And I say, baby, why don't you, lean your seat back and take a nap, and I'll wake you up when we get there. And she did. And as she was laying down, she said, I love you. And I said, I love you. And it turns out those would be the last words that we said to each other. 45 minutes later, I fell asleep as I was driving. And I woke up just before impact, actually, in enough time to see what was about to happen, but too late to do anything about it. And so when I woke up in the hospital, they said, hey, I asked, hey, where's my wife? And they said, we only brought back one body from the accident. And so both Libby and our son, whose name would have been Sam, both died in that accident. And I can remember to this day, and this was in 2004, so 20 years ago, I can still remember to this day waking up in the hospital after being in the emergency room, and the first person's face that I saw was her dad. And let me tell you, that was tough. That was a tough one, man. I mean, even now, to remember the look on his face. This was his daughter, and in a very real way, I had been responsible for her. And man, I can't tell you how much I wanted to run away and hide. It was tough. After that, I did the best I could to kind of keep myself together. But as time went on, I did an increasingly poorer and poorer job. And the relationships that I had, I burned all of them. It just really headed into a downward spiral. Started drinking a lot and regularly. Got into more car accidents, flipped my car one time in the middle of the road. Really completely out of control and incapable of being able to communicate anything. It was like I was a wild animal that was dangerous to himself and other people and just could not be controlled. I did not know. And I felt like, man, people were like, man, you need to talk to somebody. And I was like, bro, who the fuck am I going to talk to that's going to have any idea what to say? Tell me one person that I can talk to who has been through this, who has been madly in love with someone and then been responsible for killing them. Tell me somebody. And there ain't many of them, I'll tell you. And so I really felt trapped, man. And I was so, I'm a very deliberate, intentional person with a lot of perseverance. And I just thought, well, I'm just going to fucking go through it. Well, man, I got to the point where I didn't want to do that anymore. And I was really thinking, hey, this might be it. I'm about done with this. And luckily, at that time, I read an article that very much could have saved my life. It was about this little girl who was 15 years old, who was as much of a wild animal as I was. She suffered from severe manic depression, so much so that even as a 15-year-old girl, in manic episodes, she would need 3 or 4 grown men to hold her down. And when she was depressed, she would try anything she could to kill herself. Her father, who loved her, and if you can imagine being the father of a 15-year-old girl who is so unhappy that she's trying to kill herself and you can't do anything to stop it. Wow. And this grown man, this father, loved this girl so much, he was so desperate that he heard about experimental therapy with LSD. And he was so desperate that he decided to go for it on the recommendation of a doctor. He gave his daughter so much LSD that she ended up in a coma. And clearly, this father is terrified. And you can imagine the emotions that he was going through as his only daughter is in a coma by something that he did. Man. Luckily, the girl came out of the coma and she said 3 words that really changed the course of my life, because it gave me, for the first time, Simeon, there are a lot of people in life who will tell you a bunch of bullshit. There are a lot of people who will tell you a bunch of really nice sounding words, but it has no soul. It has no grit. It doesn't cost them anything. And so you don't believe them. You know, people like this, people who just say all the right things, but it's as vacuous as the wind. It's got no heart to it. Well, this was completely different. When she woke up from the coma, she said 3 words. She said, "Dad, it's over." Oh, boy, let me tell you something. Those 3 words cut to the quick in my soul, man, because I knew exactly what she meant. All of the fighting, all of the wondering, all of the desperation, all of the powerlessness, all the helplessness. It was as if she woke up from a terrible nightmare. And I tell you, Simeon, those 3 words made me feel like, man, maybe that could help. Maybe that could work. So as it turned out, I knew a girl who lived in LA. I was living in Cleveland, Ohio at the time. And this was right when everybody was going into lockdown, actually. So I called my friend and said, "Hey, can you send me as much LSD as you can?" And she did. And I decided to take as much as I could without hopefully putting myself in a coma. Had no idea what I was doing. Had no idea how much it was, no idea how much I should take. I just said, "Dude, I'm so desperate that I'm willing to do anything it takes." So I took as many as I could without thinking that I'm going to end up in a coma. And man, I'm going to tell you, the next 12 hours were the most beautiful experience of my life, without any hesitation. Here's what happened. All of a sudden, everything in life that looked ghoulish and ghastly and foreboding and terrible was transformed. I saw life for the first time in reality. Here's what I mean. For all the years after Libby died, I was certain that the reason that I felt like shit was because I was guilty. Because I was the one responsible for killing her and her son. And the reason I felt guilty was because I should. The reason I felt terrible is because I should. This is the way I ought to feel based on what happened in this trip. And bro, there was nobody that could tell me any different. Dude, 1,000 people told me, "Man, it's just an accident. These things happen. It wasn't your fault." Do you think that any one of those things made any impression when I was there and I knew what happened and I felt the effect. Dude, no words could penetrate that. But this experience did. And in this experience, I realized in a way that could never be expressed with words, hey man, look, do you know why you feel like shit? You know why? It's not because you're guilty. It's because the thing that made Libby's death beautiful is the same thing that made it tragic. And that is that you loved the shit out of that woman and she loved the shit out of you. And that is what hurts. And I realized for the first time ever that life has both sides of the coin. And I know this is such a simple realization and sounds like, God, man, you must be so dumb to not realize that as a 40-year-old man, but I didn't until that moment. Until that moment, it made sense that, hey, man, if there's an incredible amount of pleasure, inevitably there's going to be an incredible amount of pain. It so happened that it happened at a particular point in my life that I didn't expect. But at some point, that pain was coming and there was no avoiding it. I also realized that, and this is difficult to express, but I realized that life is bigger than my opinion of it. And that even in a terrible amount of pain, there is beauty in it. The thing that the overarching sentiment experience was the realization and the experience of the beauty of life. Man, look, I'm a food snob, okay? I unapologetically am a food snob. And one of the things I can't stand more than anything, do you know what a cherry tomato is? You know what that is? Those little tiny tomatoes? Dude, I can't stand wrinkly cherry tomatoes. God, they're so gross. The texture disgusts me. It's absolutely gross, okay? I'm starving out on this LSD trip, right? And all I got in my refrigerator is a bunch of stuff to make salad. And I pull out this cherry tomato and it's wrinkled as a 90-year-old woman. And don't you know, I looked at this thing and I'm telling you, without the slightest amount of acting, I loved this wrinkly ass, ugly cherry tomato. I found it was so fucking beautiful. And I giggled to myself like a little girl at the pure childish delight in life. It was extraordinary. It was an experience that bypassed all of the personality parts of ourselves that we put on, right? Hey, I'm a snob. I don't like that shit. And got right to the core. Boy, that trip very much saved my life because it showed me an aspect of life that I had been blind to before. Before Libby died, I was very much a Christian, was planning to be a pastor, as a matter of fact. So read all the Bible tons of times and read and sang all the hymns and all that. And there's this one called Amazing Grace that says, I once was blind. Now I see. And man, goddamn, can I tell you, that fucking line made a whole lot of sense to me after that experience. I finally got it. And so after that, I didn't know how to get any more LSD because my contact, drug dealers are notoriously unreliable, as it turns out. And so I started looking for magic mushrooms, and just out of happenstance, ran across a guy on Facebook who was selling magic mushroom grow kits. I thought, man, this is amazing. Well, I happened to have made my living in marketing, help selling products and services. So I called a guy up and I said, hey, man, look, this sounds crazy, but dude, I love your product. And I told him a little bit about the story of my experience. I said, man, I bet I can help you sell this because I believe in this so much, and I believe in the help that it can give to people. What do you say if I help you out? So he said, awesome. And so I did. And in that year that we worked together, I learned a lot about magic mushrooms, how they're grown, how they're harvested, the effects. And we ended up leading a retreat in Costa Rica for people who wanted to come down and have what we call a hero's journey. Now, the reason for a hero's journey is the same reason that I did it. A super dose of a psychedelic that resets the brain and says, hey, wake up. Hey, what the fuck are you doing? And gets your attention in a way that nothing else can. And man, let me tell you something. My experience on LSD, that first experience, was the most beautiful experience of my life. Leading another person through a similar journey was the second most beautiful experience of my life. The guy who I was working with, he came down. 2 other people came down, but he was the one that had the most transformative experience. Before he came down, him and his wife were having some significant problems. He was in the Navy. He was stationed in Dubai. While in Dubai, he started flirting with another woman, and his wife found out. His wife's Asian, very territorial, very fucking nuts. And she started losing it. She said she was going to kill herself, going to kill the kids, fucking crazy. The Navy immediately flies him home, ends his station of duty there, flies him home for an emergency. He comes home. The woman says, I've got a gun in the house. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to cut your dick off. I mean, dude, this is some serious shit. My man was living in the house with in a different room with something against the door so that he could hear it in case you come in. Now, part of him was thinking, she's just saying this, but man, another part of him was thinking, dude, what if she's serious? And so my man lived in constant terror. We would be on the phone and I would hear her, those like ear piercing screams that are just awful. Man, we'd be on the phone talking about business and I would hear her in the back. And I think, God damn, man, what the fuck? So this is the backdrop before he comes down. Okay. And he comes down and he's like, man, I don't think I can make this. I can't do this anymore. So he comes down. He's thinking he's going to have to leave his kids, but he's terrified because what is she going to do to him? Man, comes down. I got him through this magic mushroom trip. My man, it changes his life. He's like, after the trip, he's like, man, when I was on that trip, I looked at you and you were God. I was in heaven and you were God. And then I looked at you and I was in hell and you were the devil. He's like, it was the most beautiful and the scariest experience of my life. But I got it. He comes out, fast forward. This was in 2021 that this happened. Now, just talked to him about 2 weeks ago, him and his still wife and their still alive children just moved to a beautiful home in Texas. They're doing better than they've ever done. They're madly in love. And there's no more threats of violence. Now, man, I don't know any fucking marriage counselor. I don't know any fucking therapy that's going to be able to create that kind of result like that. And the reason is because this experience completely changed the way this man sees the world. And that's what these things do. So in the midst of all this, I became more and more enthusiastic about it. And dude, this is the craziest fucking story. I was on the beach in Costa Rica, meet this girl, chatting with her. She introduced me to another other girl. And let me grab something for you so I can show you. It'll give you the visual. Yeah. I'm on the beach and she comes and says, hey, you ever seen this before? I was like, no. And she opens it up and it's this little tiny wafer and it's a magic mushroom wafer. She's like, yeah, you break it into quarters and that's a microdose. And it's really great for people with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, yo, can you tell me, like, who makes this? And she's like, oh, yeah, I know the guy. I'll give you his contact. So I call this guy up from Costa Rica. Never met him before, right? Call him up on WhatsApp. Hey, dude, I'm a stranger in Costa Rica. How about if you let me sell these magic mushrooms online? Because there's millions of people who are suffering from depression, anxiety, and PTSD, and they ain't got no solution. Therapy doesn't work. Medication doesn't work. Breathing techniques, yoga, none of that shit works, man. They need an experience. And this is the thing that'll do it for him. Well, he was sympathetic to the same cause because he had the same feeling. And he said, hey, man, let's do it. And so as a result, I said, hey, man, we're going to. Oh, and at the same time, I read an article from from a top official at the DEA who said the train has left the station on magic mushrooms. This is when the research on from Johns Hopkins University, Yale University, even the FDA itself came out and said magic mushrooms are a breakthrough therapy for depression. Well, man, I'm seeing all this. And then the top official of the DEA says the train's left the station. I said, man, this is the time for people to get the help they need. Look, it's all an inevitability. Everybody knows the magic mushroom is going to be made legal, just like cannabis. And it don't make no goddamn sense whatsoever for people who are suffering from depression, who are waking up every day feeling this dark cloud or this heaviness, or completely anxious. Their chest is nearly bursting out of their chest because they're so nervous. It don't make no goddamn sense for them to have to wait around for the knuckleheads in Washington to figure out how they're all going to get paid so they can sign the paperwork. Instead, they need to feel better now, Jack, because now is when they're living their life. And they don't need to have their life put on hold because the pharmaceutical companies, the lobbyists, and the Congress people are all fucking trying to figure out how they can line each other's pockets while other real people are suffering every fucking day. So I said, hey, man, let's do it. And so we did.
Wow. That's a hell of a story. That's what it is. It's a powerful story. I have so many things to ask you now. I think we can make a whole series of podcasts just to discuss everything you've touched upon. But out of some egoistic self-interest, I'll ask you the one thing that I actually find very, very interesting personally. And it is that you started with the fact that you come from a church society community, and that's how you met Libby. And then the accident occurred. And then you had that heroic journey. And you said that you were planning on becoming a pastor. And so it just got me thinking, because I suppose this is something that I'm very, very interested in. At first, what were if you could compare your views on life, yourself, and God, your faith and your intellectual views, back when you were in the church community, just meeting Libby, if you could compare that with right after the accident happened, the years after the accident happened, that downward spiral, and then again, if you could compare that post the heroic journey, how did your understanding of life, God, and yourself change through these three key moments?
Wow, Simeon, that is a beautiful question, and I appreciate the fuck out of you asking that. That is, and I'll tell you, growing up, I was not religious at all. I had no connection, didn't know anything about religion. Matter of fact, never even read Bible. In fact, when I joined the Navy, I met a guy named Nate Wells who ended up becoming my best friend. And he was a pastor's kid, and he was the nicest guy I'd ever met. Jolly, full of life. I was a miserable kid. You know, I'd come from this home where there was no laughter. Okay, so I was enchanted by this guy, and he's like, "Hey, man, why don't you check out the Bible?" You know, so I go to the Barnes and Noble. I buy a Bible. It's like, "Hey, man, start reading in the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John." So I read Matthew. I start reading Mark. I swear to God, I call Nate up the next day, and I'm like, "Hey, man, I think I got a bad Bible. I think the Bible I got is something wrong with it." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Man, I read Matthew, and then I read Mark, and it says the same thing, just in different words." And he's like, "No, man, that's the way it is." He's like, "Those are all the Gospels. They tell the same story." And I was like, "Oh, all right." So I knew nothing. Okay, well, had this religious experience subsequent, and my view of myself and God at that point was, God is in heaven, I am on earth. God is great, I am terrible. God is full of love, I am a sinner, and I need to do everything I can to earn God's favor so that I can go to heaven. And I need to be as good of a person. I need to do everything right. And dude, I did, man. I was all in. Bro, I didn't jerk off. I didn't look at other women lustfully. I fasted regularly like a fucking dipshit. I say like a dipshit because I thought all of this stuff was earning something for me. You see, I thought all of this effort was like really impressing someone God, I suppose. And I was really hoping that it was. After the accident, man, if your only connection to life is this two-tiered, infinite chasm of separation that can only be crossed by the grace of God, which whatever that means, and then all of a sudden that's gone, it's a dark place, man. It's a dark place. I felt like I was in a universe that hated me. I really felt like I was doomed. That God, for whatever reason, I felt like, I don't know if you know the story of Jesus, but he was betrayed by this guy named Judas Iscariot, right?
Yeah.
I felt like that. I felt like I was the most awful, that I had betrayed the Son of God, was what it felt like in some former life or something. And that's why I was being punished. Boy, let me tell you something. That's a hard one. That's a hard one. After that, and I became very primal, very ugly in my behavior. My best friend, who was the best man at my wedding, his wife came out to Denver to visit some friends. He asked me, "Hey man, will you pick Katie up and make sure she's all right?" Of course, man. Pick her up, take her out. We have some dinner. We have some wine. I ended up making out with her, my best friend's girl, and then telling her, "Hey, don't tell him." So I became a real piece of shit, is what I'm trying to say. Because we always turn into what our view of the world is. When I was a devout Christian, man, I was so good. I was so good. I was so happy. I was so kind to everybody. And I was better than everybody. In my mind, I was like, yep, I'm better than this person. Nicest person you would want to meet. But inside, I was a fucking deceptive, arrogant hypocrite, really. I can see now. After the hero's journey, I realized that all of that's wrong. Everything about all of that is all wrong. And that the way that life is indescribable in a way that can be fully grasped by the intellect because it is infinite. But it's something like this, that God, the name that we use for what brought and sustains this world into being, infuses everything, not in some sort of pantheism where everything is God, but individually, like this phone is God and I am God, and not like that, but that there's this life in life that is the representation of God, that reality is God. God is reality. God is this world. It is our everyday being. That I started studying a lot of Hinduism and Buddhism. For a while, I thought I was God. And in a sense, that is true. That there is God within each one of you. In the Bible, it says, Jesus, the good old LJ, said, "Hey, the kingdom of God is within you." Those words, when I was a Christian, they always echoed inside of me because, I was trying to get to God if I could just do everything right. But Jesus said, "Hey, man, the kingdom of God is within you." And I had met people for whom I had that experience, with whom I'd had that experience, where I would meet them and I'd be like, man, there's something about this person that is legit. You know that kind of person? Like, you meet them, there's no pretense. They ain't trying to impress you. They don't give a fuck about you, really, about what you think of them. They're just living. And if you want to come along and be a part of it, awesome, man. They're perfectly inviting, but they're not trying to get anything from nobody. They're just living their life. And I find that to be the most remarkable human being there is. And so that's what I began living like. And so the LSD trip brought me back to life. And then through subsequent disciplines, I suppose, mostly through physical disciplines of exercise, it gave me life. I was alive, but then this expression of life through physical activity was like the embodiment of it. Does that answer your question?
Well, yes, it did beautifully. And it made me think, this is something you touched upon, which is that when this happened to you, the accident with Libby, you, in a certain way, it cut you off from all people. Because to be entirely honest with you, when you tell me this story, a part of me, and I would say that larger part of me, thinks this could not possibly happen to me. This could not, which of course is the greatest mistake to make, because it can happen and it does happen to people. But when you hear something so difficult and painful, you instinctively try to make it seem impossible to happen to you. And so obviously you're right that the people around you, whatever they were trying to say and be there for you, could have no possible understanding of what you were going through. And just like we don't understand such suffering unless we have gone through it, I think we also don't really understand the meaning of healing, what it means to be healed. I mean, right now I can see you going through this, telling this story, and I can see you rising above it, but at the same time being completely connected with it, crying, and it's not something that you have cut off from yourself, but something you live with. But I'm curious, as you've gone through this process, how would you describe, what does healing mean to you? What does it mean to heal? And when somebody has gone through something so undescribably difficult, what does it mean to heal?
Man, Simeon, I really like you, man. You have great questions. I was hoping you would ask this, actually. Have you ever heard of a guy named Wim Hof?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. After Libby died, I pursued every kind of philosophy I could to try to get out of this unbearable pain. Okay. And all the self-help bozos would say, hey man, you can't live in the past. Hey, you got to live in now. The past you can't live. You got to let go of the past. Can I tell you how fucked up, how fucking retarded this idea is? But it bamboozled me for a while. And I thought, yeah, you know what? And that's what I did. I just, you know what? That's over. Forget it. Done. As if I could divorce myself from myself. But I really tried, man. I really tried. And this is why I acted like such a dipshit. It's because I was at war with myself until I heard a story from Wim Hof. Now, Wim Hof is a remarkable human being, in my estimation. Has accomplished things that are just off the charts and mad respect. And if you know his backstory, that he was in love with the woman who was his wife. They had 3 children. She was horribly depressed and she committed suicide. My man went on to achieve incredible records, climbing Mount Everest in a pair of shorts, swimming underneath the ice in water for some world record distance, sitting in ice water for hours, things that no human has ever done in recorded history. Now, you'd think if he followed the self-help bozo's idea of success, he would have said, my wife's death was in the past. It doesn't bother me anymore. But that ain't what he says. In fact, if you pay attention to what the self-help bozos tell you, you find out that success is exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite of what they'll do. What Wim Hof said is, man, I miss my wife every day. My heart still breaks for her. And you know what, man, I love that man for being a human. Whatever the self-help bozos are trying to create, it ain't a human being. No human being is going to endure something so ghastly and then say, oh, you know what, that's over. What's next? It's not human. So what it means to heal is to feel, God damn it, is to feel. And now, this is 20 years later, Simeon. I can still feel my heart quiver. I can still feel the tears come to my eyes, man. Thank God. Because for a long time, I didn't feel any of it. I was, it's over. I wasn't a human. And you could tell because the way that I treated people wasn't human either. I wanted them to be just like a robot, just like me. Hey, man, don't feel nothing. If I don't feel nothing, then I got no respect for your feelings. What the fuck do I care how you feel? I don't care how I feel. So, this idea that after something happens, you're healed when it doesn't bother you is completely and utterly absurd. You tell somebody who lost their child, whose child was murdered or raped, or some sort of ghastly event, and you're going to tell them, hey, man, let it go. That's going to be a hard thing to do. And furthermore, at least in the way that I see the world, I don't think you ought to. Now, we do need to get to the point where it's not debilitating. In the same way that if I break my leg, I need to have a cast on it long enough for the bone to heal so that I can walk again. But the whole point is to be able to walk again. And even if I walk with a limp, well, hey, man, I'm walking. And sometimes that's just the way it is. This whole idea perpetuated by the self-help industry that people are some sort of superhuman, like Friedrich Nietzsche's Superman, that you rise above every circumstance. And that sells a lot of shit. But it ain't real. It ain't reality. Yes, we can overcome circumstances. Yes, we can accomplish things. Yes, we can do amazing accomplishments. But you cannot conquer yourself, retard. Or should you? Because you're not at war with yourself. When we're living life properly. When we're living life properly, there's no reason for us to be at war with ourselves. Maybe the best way to say it is healing means to accept not just what happened, but also the effect that it had. You see, for a long time, I was very embarrassed by the fact that it hurt like hell. I couldn't admit it, man. I was embarrassed. Hey, I should be a tough person. This should not bother me. I literally thought this. This should not bother me. Because I bought into all this self-help propaganda that made me think I should be something other than a human being. But I'm going to tell you, if you want to connect with somebody, if you want to be a friend to somebody, and you got two options, hey, man, one thing is we're going to sit down and I'm going to tell you how great I am, how strong I am, how rich I am, how many girls I've slept with, how much, all the cool shit I got. Or I'm going to tell you about, hey, man, this happened. Goddamn, that was a motherfucker. That was tough. Which set of stories is going to make you feel like you're talking to a human? Now, talking to the first person, you could be talking to a great slick salesperson. You could be talking to a great image. Talking to a great image. But I ain't here to be an image. I'm here to be a human.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's painful, bro. Here's the real truth. All this self-help nonsense is all an evasion. It's all an evasion to avoid. This is the biggest problem people have. The biggest problem human beings have is that they are afraid of their feelings. 100%. People do anything but feel their feelings. They want to tell you to talk about your feelings. Man, you ain't got to talk about shit. You ain't got to talk about your feelings at all. The first thing you got to do is feel them. Because here's what you do. Tell you to talk about your feelings. Then all of a sudden I'm going to tell you, well, this is how I feel, but I know I really shouldn't. And I know that, and everything becomes a concept, and you're completely detached from the reality of what's going on. Turning feelings into a thought so that you can avoid them. They're called feelings. They're not called talkings. Feel them. And once you've felt them and they've done the work in you, because you're a sensory creature, every feeling that we experience is information. It's teaching us, not in some weird mamby-pamby love and light and everything's perfect sort of way, but in a very real way, in the same way that if I put my hand on a hot stove, it teaches me something. Emotions are the same way. In order to honor yourself as a human, in order to be that kind of person that I was referring to earlier, who couldn't give two shits what you think about them, in order to be that person, you gotta feel, baby. You gotta feel, man. And yes, it's scary. Yes, it's sometimes painful. And it's all right. This is actually what happened in the second LSD trip. This is where I learned this lesson. Now I'm thinking about it. Because in the first LSD trip I took, it was the most beautiful experience of my life. Well, I eventually found some more. And I did another one. And it was the most terrifying experience of my life. I was shot into outer space. And I was the only living creature in the universe. Oh. God damn, can I tell you how scary that was, man? I didn't have no mother. I didn't have no friends. There was no one. God himself did not exist. And as I'm feeling this very real terror, now I could have run. I could have, had the eye mask on. I had the headphones on. I could have fucking jumped up and run out the house and acted like a crazy person. But here's what I did. Complete terror, panic stricken. And I did this. Okay. Everything's okay. Everything's okay. And I realized that the feeling, though real, didn't mean what I thought it meant. And I didn't have to be afraid. This was the beginning of courage for me. Because up until that point, when I was afraid, I thought that meant I had to do something. Feelings are feelings, not doings. You ain't got to do it. You ain't got to do nothing. You do got to feel it. So if I get angry, that doesn't mean I got to punch somebody in the face. But I can't lie to myself and be like, oh, no, I'm not bothered. I love this person. This is my brother. That's a lie. The truth, the human experience is to feel the anger and not be consumed by it. And isn't that so fucking beautiful? God damn it. Don't you love it when you can tell that a human being is full of rage or sadness or any kind of emotion, and you can see it coming up and about to overtake them and swallow them whole? Somehow they maintain their composure. Wow. Don't you think, wow, what a beautiful fucking human. Don't you think that? I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Michael, before we wrap up, I want to ask you one final question. And it is, if you imagine that right now, most probably people are listening who are in a similar situation to the one that you have been in, where they have not been able to find any consolation, and they're desperately looking for some way of healing. And perhaps they are ready to try microdosing, perhaps not. Perhaps they might wish to try psychedelics, or perhaps not at all. But if you have yourself, your past self, listening to your current self now, what would you say to that person, knowing the way he is, knowing what he knows and what he hasn't learned yet? What would you tell him, knowing that now people are listening who are in a similar spot?
Man, I would go and sit down next to that guy, and I put my arm around him as tenderly as I could, and I'd say, man, feel for you, man. And as hard as it is to believe this, and believe me, I know how hard it is for you to believe what I'm about to say. Man, you are going to be okay. That life is bigger and better and more amazing and more terrible than your thoughts about it. You don't understand life yet. And the reason you know you don't is because it looks so ugly. And look, man, if life was that ugly, it wouldn't have kept going. If everybody felt the way you feel, everybody would kill themselves. This world would not exist. There is something better. You don't understand yet. And that's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's not because you haven't tried. It's because you don't understand yet. And that's all right. But if you keep going, and you don't have to keep going. You can do whatever you want. It's your life. But if you do keep going, you'll find out. And all of this pain and all of this desperation that you are so eager and so desperately want to transform into something good, you'll see it.
Yeah. Well, Michael, I actually mean to ask you a follow-up question to this. Based on what you just said, there is a certain philosopher, I think he's from South Africa, I can't remember his name exactly, and he's known for his philosophy called anti-natalism. Essentially, his philosophy is that life is so bad and the suffering you will receive in life is so much more than any possible pleasure and happiness you can feel, that the best course of action is to just not have children and make sure that life ends as quickly as possible without inflicting any violence, just letting life end, because life cannot possibly, there's nothing that can justify the suffering that we encounter through living. And now I'm not sure what that person has gone through. I think it probably has nothing to compare with what you have gone through, and you would be perfectly justified to believe in this, but you don't seem to, the way I see you. So what would you answer to this kind of worldview?
I would say you're fucking retarded and open your eyes. Show me a fucking coin that has one side. Show me an up without a down. Show me a left without a right. Show me an in without an out. Show me pain without pleasure. And I'll tell you, you can't do it. And I'll tell you that person, as smug and as fucking so put together as he sounds, is trading a pleasure of life for a pleasure of the intellect. That he is a pervert in the intellect, because instead of taking the fucking beauty that is given to him in exchange for the pain, just like every other fucking person on the planet, he wants to pervert it into something that he can be proud of. And furthermore, you're a fucking liar, because if you really believed it, you wouldn't be talking, you'd be killing yourself. So clearly you don't believe what the fuck you're saying, you fucking liar. And I despise people who want to make people think that life is ugly when all of the evidence is to the contrary. Is life ugly at times? Yes, you fucking idiot, because you wouldn't know beauty without it. Is life painful sometimes? Fuck yes. Don't be a pussy. You wouldn't know pleasure without it. Do people betray you sometimes? Yes, they do. Because you wouldn't know faithfulness without it. And if you want to be someone who insists that everything be a certain way, or else you're not going to play and you're going to act like an intellectual pervert and come up with a philosophy that you don't even believe and try to pass it off like a fucking snake oil salesman to people, to other people, and get them to damage themselves, then you, my friend, are a fucking idiot. And please stop talking. That's what I would tell them.
I love your reaction. Well, thank you very much for being vulnerable and sharing your story and answering in such a raw way where at least I could feel what you were saying, not just understand it intellectually. So thank you very much for appearing. It's been a pleasure, and I would love to stay in touch in the future as well.
I'm down, dude. What a pleasure to talk to you. I rarely meet people who are such great listeners and able to ask such intelligent and penetrating questions. So it was a real delight for me. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
The first podcast I did, I spoke with Professor Chris Beisch, who has secretly done a 20-year-long experiment where he's a professor of religious studies, but actually he has been taking large doses of LSD and integrating and writing on the experience and so on. And at some point we got around the problem of suffering in life. And he gave a very beautiful answer. Of course, whatever answer you can give to the existence of suffering, it's never final. But he quoted a great Indian sage who said that if you want to see God, if you want to meet God, you have to be able to face suffering, to look at suffering straight in the eyes, basically. So, so hearing how tragic and painful your journey has been, still I cannot help but think how much it has deepened your authentic experience of life and being a human being. I mean, most people would be, of course, grateful that they haven't been tested in the way that you have been tested. But I think that it sounds to me like you also have much to be grateful for, because you've also seen things and understood things that most people, we cannot hope to see in that depth that you have.
Man, that touches me. Thank you. That's I appreciate that. Whew. Man, that I don't have the words for this.
You don't have what? Sorry?
I don't have the words to express what I'm feeling, but to have someone say to me that this experience has made me more human.
Thank you for listening. This ends my discussion with Michael Griswold for now. I hope you walk away from this with a new appreciation of all you can be thankful for in your life. May we all keep on the road of healing our wholeness, and may we keep learning love for ourselves and each other. And remember Rumi's words, what you seek is seeking you. See you next time.